Everybody. Welcome to I Saw the Sign, a presentation on signage in Denver's historic districts. I'm Brittany Bryant.
And I'm Crystal Marquez.
So today we're going to be talking about signs. So everyone is welcome to participate in the webinar. Staff will call on participants at the end. If you have any questions while we're going through the slideshow, type them into the Q&A and we'll answer those all at the end. Please keep your questions brief, around 2 minutes, so everybody can get a chance to ask questions. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the presentation. I'm mostly going to be talking about sign planning and locations, and Crystal is going to be talking more about the signs types specifically. So when we're talking about signs, we really want applicants to consider a hierarchy of signs. So you have your primary sign and then your smaller secondary signs, or perhaps an iconographic sign that really represents your business. Signs should be used to create visual interest and attract customers, but also subordinate to the historic architecture of the building and district. They should be readable at day and night, and we really want signs to be pedestrian oriented and at the pedestrian level. Signs really should not be located to attract views from automobiles or located really high up on the building. So here we have some signs that are all pedestrian oriented. They're all at the ground floor. So that's really what we're looking for when we're talking about signs. Signs should also be simple signage that complements and reinforces the building's architecture. So here we have some signs that really do that and are also using the hierarchy of signage. So we have the Baxter signage, which is actually the original name of the Rossonian Hotel. So that sign is located in the Five Points Historic District, and you can see how that really complements the entablature and cornice of the Rossonian Hotel. We have Cookbook Cafe and Emporium, which is located in a sign band. So these are often found on historic buildings where there is a specific area for the signs that can be placed on the historic building. And then we have the Crawford building. That is the name of the building. And then you see the arcade sign below, which is the tenant signage located at the ground floor. And you can see how that Crawford sign is really following that arch in the building cornice and really accenting that historic building. So signs should also be designed to minimize visual clutter for the historic building and the surrounding historic context. So we recommend that tenants use about 3 signs and only about 3 sign types whenever possible. So really simple sign program for signage within the historic districts. We don't like to maximize the amount of signs. We really like the building to stay the prominent feature of the district and not the sign itself. So you shouldn't overpower the buildings, and you should remove all evidence of old signs when you're installing new signs in the historic districts. Signs also need to be constructed out of high quality materials and finishes that complement the historic buildings and the durable quality of historic buildings. So no internally illuminated cabinet signs. Neon is highly encouraged within our historic districts, as well as halo illumination or illumination from an external light fixture. So here you see a shaped iconographic sign on the bottom for a gallery. So you have a shaped pot that's really representing that use, or you have a sign for a winery and bistro that has individual corks in the sign. And then the Rio sign is a neon sign, and then the gas lamp sign is individual letters located just above the building entrances, which is all things we encourage with that integrated sign design. So when you're installing signs on historic buildings, you also need to not damage, not damage the historic building. So it's best to mount signs within the mortar of the historic building and not directly into the brick of the historic building. You really want to limit the number of penetrations into the facade of the building and reuse existing penetrations whenever possible. Or an existing bracket if that's possible. And you really want to complement the architecture of the historic building. So this is the rock mount sign, which is a Western wear company, and you can really see how that individual high quality letters located just above the storefront is really complementing that historic building. So one of the things that we have to help with sign planning is a comprehensive sign plan, which we call CSPs. There are 3 types of CSPs within the city of Denver. There is the Vital Sign CSP, and this is used in all the downtown zone districts anytime you're wanting to do a projecting sign for a multi-tenant building. So that's mainly the lower downtown historic district and the downtown commercial historic district. There's also large facility signs. So for landmark purposes, this is more things like campuses or like Lowry or the Denver Art Museum, which is a large campus. And then you have supplemental sign plans. So CSPs are reviewed by Landmark and the planning team to really create a coordinated effort of signage in terms of sign types and sign locations. So here we have the CSP for the Colorado National Bank building. The Colorado National Bank building is a individual Denver landmark located downtown at 17th and Champa Street. So this is the site plan for the Colorado National Bank building. It's identifying all possible locations for signage for this multi-tenant building. So within this building, there is a hotel, a restaurant space, and a coffee space. And so the business really wanted some projecting signs, and to do that in downtown, you have to create a CSP. They also had some existing signs that they wanted grandfathered into their use. So the hotel entrance is actually on the back side of the building from a parking lot. So the primary sign for the hotel use is located on Champa Street, which is indicated with D on this site plan. And you can see that here on this elevation towards the rear of the building near that parking lot. And you can see how this really creates a coordinated sign program for this building that won't overwhelm that building. And all the signs have to align with each other, which really creates a cohesive program. So comprehensive sign plans are really great if you have multiple tenants in your building and you really want a unified sign program. So here we have the approved sign for the primary tenant within the use, which is the Renaissance Hotel. They have an iconographic projecting sign that has a layered R with neon on it, and then it has the minimal wording for Renaissance below. So this is really what CSPs are intended to achieve, is a unified sign program and iconographic signs for those uses. And then this is the approved sign for Range, which is their restaurant tenant that is located within the Colorado National Bank. This sign is located at the corner of 17th and Champa, and it's designed to look like a ranch brand. So you have the iconographic cutout arrow that is then illuminated with those external lamps. So within Denver, there are a couple traditional sign types. Wall signs, which are signs attached to or painted on the building facade. Zoning allows them to project about 24 inches from the facade, but Denver Landmark Preservation recommends about 3 inches. A projecting sign, which is a sign attached to and projecting from the facade that can either be shaped or a blade sign. An arcade sign that is attached to a structure in an arcade or in a column space. Window and door graphics, those are basically just signs applied to the window or door or within 3 feet of the window or door, a canopy and awning sign, and then ground signs. So those are the traditional sign types within Denver, and we do have guidelines that deal with all the sign types that we allow within Denver, and Crystal's mainly going to talk about those in more detail. But for wall signs, we do encourage high quality materials, individual letters. So here you have some examples of some wall signs that have been approved within Denver landmark historic districts. So we have the urban farmer sign, which is a really good use of sign hierarchy. So they have their iconographic bull projecting sign, and then they have a wall sign for urban farmer right at their entrance. You have the David B. Smith Gallery sign, which is just individual letters located right above the storefront. The Morton sign is a halo illuminated sign. And then Public Realty is a neon illuminated sign on a conduit box. So these are all examples of really iconographic good wall signs within the historic districts. If you're a multi-tenant building, we really encourage the use of panel and directory signs. These should also be high quality materials and incorporate good design aspects into the sign, but they are classified as wall signs per zoning, so we do encourage those as well for multi-tenant buildings. In Denver, there are 2 types of projecting signs. There are iconographic blade signs and vital signs. So we really like to see the vital signs in downtown, and that's actually required by zoning. These are 3D shaped signs, and you can see those here. And here is an example of a vital sign. So vital signs are intended to be a representation of the business and use minimal wording and lettering on the sign. So here you can see that this is for a Mexican restaurant. It's a skull drinking a margarita, and it has very minimal lettering and then external lighting. So now I'll hand it over to Crystal to take over.
Thanks, Brittany. So here you can see a blade sign that is got shaped. So on the left, you can see an example of a sign submittal we received for a coffee shop. On the left is the first iteration of that sign that the business owner liked. So the sign was internally illuminated circle, which is something our design guidelines discourage, which is the use of internally illuminated plastic and flat face signage. After working with the sign company, we explained to them our design guidelines and that if they could revise the sign to meet them, that could potentially be reviewed administratively. So they came back a few weeks later with this design on the right. And as you can see, it has more shape to it. The letters for Federal Coffee were built up. So, and it actually had a lot more dimension. So due to changing the sign to meet our design guidelines, getting more of those 3-dimensional elements and only having the letters be illuminated with the push-through lettering, this iteration did meet our design guidelines, and we reviewed and approved it administratively. Next slide. So here's an example of a projecting blade sign. This is in our 5 Points Historic Cultural District. This one uses neon lettering, and it has a shaped top portion and uses aluminum as its durable material. So it has those built up elements, and you can see how it adds character to the building and our streetscape. Our design guidelines state that these types of signs we should encourage creatively designed projecting blade signs. So it says not to use this with a combination of a projecting shape. Do you want to choose one or the other? You do that craft built up cutout imagery, as well as objects projecting outside of the rectangle or circle, and it creates a more artful appearance. And you limit these projecting signs to 1 per facade or business. Corner buildings get an exception sometimes because they can have 1 on each facade or at the corner. And the use of more ornate brackets is sometimes consistent with the building architecture. In this case, it wasn't necessary. Next slide. So now we're talking about arcade signs. Our design guidelines state that arcade signs for businesses should be located near entries. Under these arcades, they should hang from the arcade roof using very simple brackets, and can be either unlit or indirectly lit, typically with external illumination. Arcade signs are meant to have simple shapes. So as you can see, is a simple rectangle. We typically have them limited to 6 square feet in sign face, and just making sure it's compatible with the architectural features of the building, should be mounted parallel to the building and completely under the arcade. Next slide. So here's an example of some awning signage. Awning signage happens a lot in lower downtown, but does occur in other areas as well. Awnings are typically used as secondary signage, though they can be the primary signage depending on the storefront. We do limit signage on awnings to text at the bottom horizontal band of the awning, as you can see here in the bakery for dogs and also on the right. We do require that the awnings be a traditional triangular shape to frame the storefront windows or doors. We don't allow use of arched or bubble shaped awnings, and we don't typically allow logos or any other type of signage on the top portion of it. So only at the horizontal band, as you can see here. Next slide. So here we have canopy sign example. Canopy signs are typically located on an architectural canopy, as you can see here, sticking out from the building. Canopy signs can be mounted either above or below, and soon also on the sign face, anything attached to the canopy will be considered a canopy sign. These are used to accent entries. So where one historically existed on a warehouse, we would be supportive of it. And even on new infill buildings in historic districts, you can use canopy signage. The main thing is not to cover or remove any architectural details when you're mounting signage to canopies, and just to keep it in measurement and size and proportion with the canopy. So this is just one example that was mounted to the top of the canopy. It's aluminum letters with individual LED bulbs. So it has more of a design that isn't flat and has more depth. Next slide. So here we have ground signs. Ground signs are used for businesses typically outside of downtown and for civic or institutional buildings or houses that have been converted to new uses. These signs should be subordinate in size to the historic buildings if they are near historic buildings, and should also be simple and easy to read. So we do typically ask that ground signs be limited to 1 per site, and that they not be taller than 5 feet tall, just not to obstruct the structure it's in front of. We also typically ask that the lettering or words not be larger than, I think, 20 square feet. Simplified designs are usually best, also using individual letters whenever possible also helps do that. And really it be compatible with the architecture of the building and the materials it's using. So just something very simple. As you can see with the public library sign, it's a brick building, so it has that brick base. And then the Cass Mansion sign, you can see that it's a little bit shorter, so it doesn't over dominate the architecture. Next slide. So here's some examples of what we're trying to avoid when we have design guidelines for our historic districts and individual landmarks. We're really trying to avoid kind of plastic and terminally illuminated things. We find that they're not durable materials and they don't age well over time. Exposed conduit, as you can kind of see in the wine and spirits picture, you can see like the metal sticking out at the side. And it's not a high quality material. The Blockbuster video is kind of like an arched bubble awning, which we don't typically allow. And you can see with the Little Caesars sign, it covers the whole window and doesn't allow transparency, which is not just something we try to avoid, but is something in zoning that is not allowed. Next slide. And so here's a few more examples. Again, you can see exposed conduit from the Fresh Craft sign on the left side, but also you can see the bracket that sticks out for a banner sign there. So something we also ask for is that when you're getting signs, new signs approved, you remove old brackets or materials for old signage so as not to clutter the building and make sure it gets cleaned up when it gets new signage for new tenants. We also want signage to be pedestrian oriented, as Brittany stated towards the beginning. So like kind of the sign on the parking garage on the left is at the top of the building and probably not very legible or readable for anyone at the street. And the lit sign here, you can see sometimes, you know, making sure that the signs that you're proposing are high quality, durable materials, which this doesn't look like it is, but it's also the size of it is not fitting with the architecture of the building or its placement. Next slide. So we also wanted to hit on historic signage. We get questions about that a lot. So the pictures here show historic signs that are designated, and by designated, they're designated because the building is designated, not that the signs are individually designated. So they're designated with the building that they're located on or attached to. So they're protected with the building, but not individually. Here you can see like at the bottom, the Burger Brothers building that says barber and beauty shop, fixtures and supplies. Obviously, it doesn't have that use anymore, but the historic signage is important to keep. It's integral to the building, although this building is now used as residential lofts. And then the Benjamin Moore sign is just an iconic Denver sign you see a lot of pictures of. And so we're glad that these signs are protected, along with the Paramount sign, which is still in use today. That one is also protected with the building. Next slide.
I don't know why it's going backwards.
Whoops. So we also wanted to point out some examples of signs that are not protected. You know, all these signs here you can see are not on protected buildings or sites. For instance, the University Hills Plaza sign at the bottom, you know, we heard that the site may be redeveloped, but, you know, the sign is iconic of this place and this area. And so there have been conversations of how do we save the sign and keep it? Is there a way to protect it? You know, at this point in time, there actually isn't a way to protect these signs, but it is something we, you know, are looking into for the future. So just wanted to say, you know, we see these signs and we would like to protect them and make them historic, but at this time, there's no real way to do that without protecting the buildings with them. Next slide. And so another one of our guidelines is to maintain existing historic signage. So as you can see here, Pete's Kitchen and the Satire Lounge, these signs and these structures are located in our Wyman Historic District. And they are animated signs, which the zoning code doesn't really support anymore. But with this particular one, they wanted to reanimate the signs, which we were supportive of because we feel that this historic signage adds to the character of the districts in Colfax Avenue. So when the applicants went to the Board of Adjustment for zoning to ask for this variance, we did go to support them. So any way that we can support historic signage in our districts, if there is any way that we can support it or help it be saved, we do try to do that if we can. And I think this guideline helps us do that as well. Next slide. And then we have the 715 Club sign. This is in 5 points. It's an existing sign. And as you can see, our guidelines say to repair and keep historic signs. However, with this sign, they had to fix the sign on site and fix the neon because this sign sticks out and is above the top of the building, making it a roof sign, which in today's zoning code, would not be allowed. And so if they had removed the sign to repair it, they would not have been able to put the sign back according to the code. So they did have to repair this sign on site, but luckily they got to do that and keep the sign, and it's still there today. Next slide. And then finally, we have preserving historic painted wall signs. So for this, you can see the before at the top for this building was covered in stucco, which they removed and found the Yui Cafe mural under it, and luckily got to preserve it while they restored the building. So this is another guideline that helps save historic signs. In Lodo, we also have a guideline saying to save and preserve historic ghost signs. So even if it was very light or aged over time, at least in Lower Downtown, we also have guidelines that really want to preserve those historic signs. Next slide. So here you can see just where to go on our website when you're looking for design review for signage, where to look for guidelines. If you need a comprehensive sign plan, this is the place to go on our website. Next slide. And then finally, if you guys have questions for us, please let us know. We're happy to answer them. And you can see on the right any upcoming webinars for other stuff with Landmark. And that's it for today. And I don't see any Q&A. Brittany, did you see any?
I don't.
Great. Well, if you guys have questions, you can email us. You can put them in the Q&A. This will also get posted to the website. We're happy to help any way we can.
Crystal and I principally do the sign review for the landmark districts. So we're your go-to persons if you have questions about those.
Mm-hmm. And thank you guys for attending.
We'll give it a few more minutes in case some questions roll in, but not seeing any so far. Okay, well, it looks like we are out of time here and don't see any questions rolling in. But as Crystal said, if you have any questions, feel free to email us. We're happy to answer those. And thank you for attending today.